The air at Arlington was unnervingly still that afternoon, like even the wind dared not disturb this place. Rows of white headstones stretched into the horizon, silent witnesses to centuries of sacrifice. And at their center, guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier, stood a lone figure motionless, rifle shouldered, eyes locked straight ahead. Tourists whispered, cameras clicked. It was supposed to be a sacred hush, until Vivian arrived. Click, clack. Her designer heels cracked against the marble walkway like tiny gunshots. A bold red coat billowed behind her, and oversized sunglasses shielded eyes that scanned the crowd with practiced arrogance. Vivian was used to being the center of attention, and she clearly craved it now. Really, she scoffed loudly, loud enough for every nearby head to turn. He just stands there. That's the big deal. A few gasps fluttered through the crowd. Parents tightened their grip on their children. A veteran in a wheelchair frowned, but the guard didn't move. Not a blink, not a muscle. Vivian smirked and strutted closer. Bet he's not even allowed to talk, she said, circling the guard like a cat taunting a bird. What if I just made him? Her words dripped mockery, and yet the guard's posture never faltered. His boots were anchored in perfect alignment, shoulders squared, eyes fixed forward as though carved from marble. The sunlight glinted off the bayonet at the tip of his ceremonial rifle. Look at him, Vivian said to no one and everyone, pretending to be important. Then she snapped her fingers right next to his ear. The sound cracked the air like a whip. The crowd collectively inhaled. Every heartbeat seemed to freeze. But the guard didn't move. His jaw stayed locked, gaze unbroken, the very embodiment of unshakable duty. Even his breath was invisible. Something flickered in the air, then not movement, not sound, just a shift, a tension that crawled up everyone's spines at once. Like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Vivian tilted her head, smiling like she'd just won some secret game. She had no idea she had just stepped onto sacred ground and that her game was about to end. The crowd had gone silent, but beneath that silence lay centuries of history, pain, and pride woven into this marble ground. Few in the gathering knew what it meant to wear that uniform. Fewer still could imagine what it had cost him. His name was Sergeant Daniel Cole. Before the crisp blue jacket and white gloves, he'd been a dusty silhouette trudging across a scorched Afghan valley. The sun had been brutal there, blinding, burning, merciless. And so had the war. Daniel had been 19 when he watched his best friend, Private Jack Rains, vanish in a plume of dirt and fire from a roadside IED. 1 second they were laughing about a care package of stale cookies, and the next, Jack was gone, just a helmet lying where he had stood. Daniel had carried that silence ever since. It echoed in every clatter of boots on parade ground, every measured step. After the war, he came home to parades, but inside he was hollow. While others moved on, he woke to phantom blasts and the weight of names etched on memorial walls. He tried college, he tried construction, nothing fit. Then one gray autumn day, he visited Arlington. That it was quiet, there so quiet, it scared him. The wind whispered through endless rows of white headstones, each one a life cut short, each one someone's whole world. And then he saw them, the tomb guards, moving in perfect 21-step sequences, heels clicking like clockwork, rifles gleaming, eyes forward, never breaking focus even as tourists pressed close. They weren't just standing still, they were holding the line for all who never came home. Daniel knew, in that instant, what he had to do. It took 2 years of relentless training, march drills until his feet bled, inspections so strict a single loose thread meant starting over. He memorized the history of every conflict since 1775. He stood motionless for hours in freezing rain and blistering heat, learning to silence every itch, every blink, every tremor. And finally, on a golden morning in May, he took his first post before the tomb of the unknown soldier. As he brought his rifle to shoulder and heard the echo of his heel strike marble, the weight of silence wrapped around him, not heavy but sacred. Jack would never get to stand here, so Daniel would stand for him. Vivian knew none of this. All she saw was a man in an old-fashioned uniform, and all she felt was boredom. Vivian Markham had never lost anyone, not really. She had grown up in a high-rise glass tower above Manhattan, where problems were solved with money and consequences was something that happened to other people. Her father was a billionaire real estate developer who measured affection in quarterly bonuses, and her mother was an ex-model who floated through charity galas like she was made of perfume and smoke. Vivian had been raised on private jets, velvet ropes, and applause. The only thing she'd ever had to fight for was attention, and she had learned early that if you were loud enough, shocking enough, Outrageous enough people looked at you. By 24, she had turned her life into an endless stream of curated chaos. Luxury brand deals, viral controversies, and champagne-fueled tantrums caught on paparazzi lenses. She had millions of followers who adored her boldness and millions who despised her arrogance either way. They watched so when her PR agent suggested a trip to DC to look more patriotic. Vivian had rolled her eyes and booked a helicopter, and now here she was, at Arlington National Cemetery, heels clicking like gunfire on sacred stone, scanning the scene like a stage. To her, this place wasn't sacred, it was dull, just white stones, stiff soldiers, and rules. Always rules. Rules were for other people. Vivian was here to break them. Around her, the crowd still whispered in uneasy ripples. They understood what this place meant, even if she didn't. Arlington was more than a cemetery. It was the heartbeat of American sacrifice. Over 400,000 men and women rested here, spanning every war from the Revolution to today. Each stone marked a life once full of laughter, fear, and love, now silent. And at the center, the tomb of the unknown soldier stood as the most sacred promise of all, that no one who served would ever be forgotten, even if their name was lost to time. Every movement of the guard was steeped in meaning. 21 steps, 21 seconds of stillness, 21, the highest military honor. The guard wasn't there to entertain. He wasn't there for applause or photos. He was there because someone had to be. Someone had to prove that silence could be stronger than chaos, that stillness could be louder than vanity. Daniel knew that. Vivian did not. She saw only a statue to provoke. He saw a promise he had sworn to keep, and as she stepped closer, sunglasses flashing, lips curling in a half-smile, Daniel's grip on his rifle tightened so slight no one else noticed. He did not see a celebrity. He saw a threat to the silence he had bled to protect, and deep inside, beneath the steel discipline of his training, the boy who had lost Jack whispered a single warning: not here, not today. The marble plaza around the tomb felt like it existed outside of time. Even the air seemed to move slower here. Daniel Cole had stood in storms that tore tents from the ground. He had marched through valleys where gunfire cracked without warning, but nothing demanded more from him than this silence, this sacred stillness. And Vivian Markham had come to break it. Her heels tapped a lazy rhythm on the marble, echoing too loud in the hush. She twirled her sunglasses between her fingers, gaze sweeping over the guard like he was part of some museum exhibit. You know, she said to no one in particular, voice dripping with amusement, if they wanted to impress people, they should have hired someone who actually moves. A ripple passed through the gathered tourists. Quiet mutters, a hissed she from a mother clutching her son's shoulder. A veteran with silver hair shifted in his wheelchair, jaw tightening. Daniel didn't flinch, eyes forward, posture flawless. To Vivian, it was almost funny. To the crowd, it was blasphemy. Bet he's not even allowed to talk, Vivian mused, stepping closer. What if I told him a secret? Would he even blink? She leaned in suddenly, as if to whisper. The movement made a child gasp. Daniel's jaw stayed locked. He had been trained to let words wash over him like rain on stone. No reaction, no eye contact, no acknowledgement. His mind stayed focused on the counter 1 seconds between movements, each heartbeat measured. His grip on the rifle was firm but loose, thumb locked along the stock, muzzle angled precisely. His world narrowed to the marble beneath his boots, and the oath that bound him here. But Vivian wasn't finished. She pivoted to face the crowd, arms spreading wide like a performer taking a bow. Come on, she said loudly, flashing her phone camera. Let's see if he's human. She strutted in front of Daniel and snapped a selfie, her bright grin sharp against his stoic silhouette. The phone chirped. A murmur rippled through the gathering. Phones lowered, brows furrowed. A father whispered, "Show some respect," and gently turned his daughter away. Vivian rolled her eyes. Oh, relax. He's not a real robot. Are you, soldier boy? Her tone was sugar-laced with poison. No movement. A woman in a quiet navy cardigan took a small step forward from the crowd. Her voice trembled as she spoke. My brother's buried here, she said softly. Please don't do this. Vivian's eyes flicked over her like she was furniture. Then he should have gotten a better job. Gasps hissed like steam. The veteran in the wheelchair gripped his armrest, knuckles white. A young boy tugged on his father's sleeve, whispering, Dad, why is she being mean? Daniel heard everything. He always did, but he stood still, because that was the job. He remembered the words from his Sentinel Creed, carved into his soul during training. My standard will remain perfection. Through the years of diligence and praise, and the discomfort of the elements, I will walk my tour in humble reverence. Vivian's laughter cut across. the plaza like glass breaking. She swung back toward him, suddenly inches from his face, eyes glinting. What if I just— She made a flicking motion toward his hat, knocked that silly thing off. That drew an audible warning from the crowd. Don't, someone snapped. You'll get arrested, another muttered. Vivian smirked. Please, what's he gonna do? Glare harder. She took another step closer so near Daniel could see her reflection on the polished black lenses of her sunglasses. He did not move. He did not breathe. Inside, the old rhythm of battle thrummed faintly in his chest, steady, grounding. 1, 2, 3. His pulse slowed even as hers seemed to dance faster with mischief. Then she snapped her fingers again, sharper this time, right beside his temple. The sound cracked like a gunshot. A ripple of fury surged through the onlookers. A man in a folded flag ball cap muttered, "Unbelievable." The veteran's eyes were wet now. Though he said nothing, Vivian turned slowly, savoring their stares like applause. "Oh, come on," she said. "It's just a guy in a costume." Her voice bounced harshly off the marble. The plaza felt colder somehow, though the sun was bright. Daniel's thoughts drifted not away, but deeper. He thought of Jack again, his laugh echoing down a dusty Afghan road. He thought of folding a flag into trembling hands. He thought of how silence had been the only thing that ever steadied the storm inside him. And how this woman was trying to shatter it. Vivian crouched suddenly, like she was inspecting a statue, peering at the shine on his boots. "Wow, you even polished the soles. Cute." Then she straightened and spoke loudly, as if delivering a line to an invisible camera. "This whole thing is so performative. Imagine spending your life pretending to matter." That one hit the crowd like a slap. A mother turned away, shielding her little girl's ears. The veteran closed his eyes. Even the birds seemed to go silent. Daniel stood. His discipline was steel wrapped in silence. And right now that silence was the only thing holding this moment together. The rules of the guard were clear. No reaction unless the tomb itself was threatened. But her orbit was tightening. Vivian pulled a small lipstick from her purse, popped the cap with a click, and traced a heart in the air. Maybe I should kiss him on the cheek. Would that break the spell? The crowd stiffened. A few phones started recording. One reporter press badge swinging muttered, "This is going to go viral." Daniel's jawline looked carved from stone. His eyes stayed locked forward, but a single vein had begun to pulse faintly at his temple. His rifle remained at shoulder arms, perfectly still. Inside, he silently counted the seconds like he always did. 19, 20. Vivian tilted her head, lips curved like a blade. "This is boring. Let's make him do something." Then she clapped loud, sharp, directly in front of his face. The sound cracked like thunder in the hush. A dozen people gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh no," and Daniel did nothing, absolutely nothing, which somehow made it more terrifying, because the stillness felt alive, now waiting. Even Vivian blinked at that, just for half a second, before her smirk returned. "Fine," she said lightly, turning her back on him. "Guess I'll just post my video later. #StatueBoy. She glanced back, expecting to see a man she could mock forever. What she saw was a soldier carved from time itself, unblinking, unbreakable, holding an entire nation's grief and honor in his silence. And the crowd had changed. They weren't just uncomfortable now. They were angry. Every face was turned toward Vivian, not in admiration, but in quiet condemnation. Phones were still recording, but now it felt less like entertainment and more like evidence. She tossed her hair, pretending not to notice. But for the first time, her smile flickered. Daniel stood like a mountain in a storm, silent, still, watching without watching. He knew she was reaching the point of no return. They always did. The ones who thought silence meant weakness. And he also knew, though she didn't, that once that line was crossed, there would be no going back. Vivian was about to learn what it meant to awaken the guard, and the air itself seemed to lean closer, waiting. The plaza had gone deathly quiet. Even the breeze seemed to have stopped moving, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Vivian stood with one hand on her hip, lips pursed in mocking amusement, but something behind her eyes twitched. It wasn't fun anymore. It was personal now, and she was about to prove a point to herself more than to anyone else. She took a slow, deliberate step forward until her toes brushed the thin black line in the marble, the invisible boundary between the public and the sacred space of the guards tour. Gasps rippled like wind through tall grass. Everyone knew that line. Everyone knew not to cross it. But Vivian wasn't everyone. "Well," she murmured, loud enough for all to hear, "let's see if Statue Boy has batteries." Then she stepped over the line. The reaction from the crowd was instant. A woman clapped a hand to her mouth. The silver-haired veteran jerked upright in his wheelchair like he'd been shocked. A ranger in a distant corner froze mid-step. Eyes wide, Vivian's heel clicked on the forbidden marble, sharp as a gunshot. Daniel saw it all with peripheral precision, but he didn't turn his head. Not yet. His discipline was a coiled spring wound, so tight it sang in his bones. Her perfume drifted close, sugary and invasive. She circled him slowly, like a predator testing a chained animal. You know, this is pathetic, she sneered, standing here like a mannequin while the world burns. Do you even think? Do you even feel? No response. Vivian stopped directly in front of him. The shadow she cast slashed across the shine of his boots. Look at me, she demanded. Her voice low, sharp. Silence. She snapped her fingers again, right between his eyes. Stillness. And something in her cracked fine. She spat. If you won't move. Her hand darted out fast, sudden, and tapped the barrel of his rifle. It was barely a touch, a feather-light flick, but it detonated through the plaza like a bomb. A dozen people shouted at once. Ma'am, don't. Step back. Are you insane? Vivian froze mid-motion, eyes widening slightly at the sudden explosion of voices, and that's when she saw it. The change. Daniel moved. Not fast, not loud, but with terrifying precision. The rifle swung from shoulder arms to port arms in a single blur, metal flashing in the sun. His boots slammed together, the sound a sharp crack in the silence. The sudden motion made Vivian flinch backward, instinct jerking her body before her mind caught up. He took exactly one step forward, driving his heel down like a hammer, and his voice rang out, a voice that seemed to echo off the marble itself. My am step. Away from the tomb. Now the command hit like thunder. The ground seemed to shake with it. Children clutched their parents. Phones wavered in trembling hands. The veteran let out a choked sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Vivian's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her sunglasses slipped slightly down her nose. Daniel's eyes were locked on hers now, cold and piercing, the blue of a winter sky over a battlefield. They were the eyes of someone who had buried friends, who had walked through fire and chosen to stand still anyway. Remove yourself from this area, he barked, every syllable clipped like a rifle bolt, or be removed. The plaza went utterly silent. Even the birds had stopped. Vivian stood frozen, chest heaving, mouth trembling on the edge of words she couldn't seem to find. She had wanted a reaction. Now she had one, and it was nothing like she imagined. A U.S. Park police officer had started jogging toward them from the perimeter now, radio crackling at his belt. The ranger was hurrying too, muttering oh no, under her breath. Daniel didn't move further. He didn't need to. He had taken only one step, but it felt like the ground itself had shifted under him, like the marble was part of him. His rifle remained across his chest now, angled, ready, not threatening but unignorable. Vivian stumbled one small step backward, her heels skidding on the stone. Why you can't talk to me like that, she stammered. Though her voice cracked, Daniel's tone didn't waver. Step back now. It wasn't loud this time. It didn't need to be. It was the sound of mountains speaking. And then Vivian did something no one expected. She laughed, high, shaky, brittle, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. Fine, she said, flinging up her hands. Whatever, you win, soldier boy. She tried to roll her eyes, tried to make it look casual, but her face was pale beneath the makeup. She stepped backward over the black line, the sound of her heel hitting the public side of the boundary was somehow deafening. It was like the world exhaled all at once. Daniel watched her retreat, eyes locked until she cleared the line, then returned his gaze forward as though she'd never existed. One precise turn on his heel, rifle swung back to shoulder arms, boot strike ringing like a bell. The movement was seamless, surgical, flawless, like a door slamming shut. The ranger reached Vivian first, face stern. Ma'am, you're lucky you weren't detained. That was a federal offense. Vivian waved her off, but her hands were trembling. I didn't even touch, she began, but stopped when she saw half a dozen phones still recording her every word. The park police officer arrived next, voice clipped and sharp. You crossed into a restricted ceremonial area and interfered with an active sentinel. You will come with me, murmurs rose. Cameras zoomed. Vivian's face flushed hot crimson. Are you serious? She hissed. Deadly, the officer replied flatly as they led her away. The crowd parted without a word, not like making room for a celebrity, like stepping aside from a storm. The veteran in the wheelchair raised one trembling hand to his brow, in a silent salute as Daniel resumed his exact measured march. 21 steps down the mat, a clean pivot, 21 seconds pause, a rifle angled just so. The plaza was still electric, buzzing like the aftermath of lightning. Vivian glanced back once, just once. Daniel didn't look at her. He never would, because she no longer existed here. Because in this place, the living are guests and the guard only answers to the dead, and that, more than anything he said or did, made her shiver. She had tried to break the silence, and the silence had broken her. The air was buzzing like static just after lightning strikes. Vivian's heels clacked awkwardly as the park police officer led her away from the ceremonial plaza. Her once effortless strut now more like the stumbling retreat of someone caught in a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Cameras followed her every step. Dozens of phones had captured everything: her taunting, her trespass, the explosive command that froze her blood. Already, screens in the crowd lit up as people replayed the footage in stunned disbelief. Some were uploading it before she even cleared the marble steps. Behind her, Daniel moved as if nothing had happened. 20-1 steps. Halt. About face. 21 seconds. Every movement was perfect, eerily perfect, like he had carved himself from the same marble he stood upon. The rhythm was steady, sacred, invulnerable. And the contrast between him and her chaos and calm was breathtaking. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Vivian hissed to the officer as they neared the shaded walkway. The officer didn't look at her. "Right now, you're someone who interfered with a military ceremonial guard line. That's all you are." "That guard yelled at me," she snapped. He stepped at me like he was going to protect the tomb," the ranger interjected coldly, striding alongside them, "which is his sworn duty." "You don't understand," Vivian said, forcing a brittle laugh. "I'm on the board of cultural affairs. I know senators." "This is going to this," the officer cut in sharply, "is going on record. Not your record, not mine, the public's." "Cameras don't lie," Vivian's words faltered. For the first time all day, she had nothing to say. Back on the plaza, the crowd was silently united in awe. Parents crouched down to whisper to their children about honor, about duty, about respect. Veterans stood straighter, eyes shining. Even teenagers, usually glued to their phones, were staring at Daniel like they were seeing something they'd never understood before. The veteran in the wheelchair spoke softly to no one in particular. He didn't move until it mattered. Suddenly, a shout rose from near the steps. "It's already online." Heads turned. A young man held up his phone. 4 million views in 10 minutes. She's everywhere. Vivian froze mid. "What?" The officer didn't stop walking. "You wanted attention," he said. "You got it." A distant cheer erupted on odd sudden burst of clapping from the edge of the crowd. More phones rose like a wave. They weren't clapping for Vivian, they were clapping for him. Daniel never acknowledged it. He never would. He just pivoted sharply, boots striking the mat like a clock chime, and resumed his endless watch. The applause died down as quickly as it came, replaced by a reverent hush. By the time they reached the visitor center, a second park police unit was waiting. The lead officer handed Vivian a folded notice. "This is a federal citation," he said. "Interfering with ceremonial duties. You are banned from the plaza until further notice. You may be summoned for a hearing." Vivian tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous." "Ma'am," the officer said, "you disrespected the tomb of the unknown soldier. There's nothing ridiculous about this." Meanwhile, the video was exploding. Clips raced across every platform. "Woman taunts tomb guard, regrets it instantly." The guard took one step, and the world went silent. Hashtags burned into trending lists in real time. Even major news outlets were calling for comment. Anchors replayed the moment Daniel's boot struck forward, and his voice roared through the air, describing it as the sound of centuries of sacrifice, speaking through one man. Vivian sat on a bench in the visitor center lobby, shoulders slumped, her sunglasses trembling in her hand. Her phone buzzed relentlessly: messages, missed calls, public statements drafted by her assistant, but she couldn't bring herself to look. Somewhere out on the plaza, the measured cadence of boots echoed faintly. 21 steps turned 21 seconds. That sound cut deeper than any insult could have. She had tried to shatter the stillness, but the stillness had outlasted her. It always would. And out there on the marble under the eternal sun, Daniel kept walking. One man, one rifle, one promise made to the fallen. Unbroken, untouchable, unmoved. The sun had dipped low behind the marble columns by the time the chaos finally cleared from the plaza. Vivian was long gone, escorted away in silence by the base security team, her protests having dwindled into broken whispers. The crowd that had witnessed everything was still lingering, hushed, as if unsure whether it was even appropriate to breathe loudly again. The sharp contrast from earlier, the gears, the shouts, the camera flashes, was almost haunting. The tomb guard stood at his post once more, exactly where he had begun. His uniform was flawless, again, every crease restored, every button perfectly aligned. It was as if none of it had happened. But something in the air said otherwise. Something had shifted, not in him, but in everyone who had watched. God Colonel Mercer appeared from the steps and walked slowly across the plaza. He didn't hurry. He didn't speak. When he reached the guard, he paused, just a few feet away. The guard's eyes did not flicker. His rifle remained shouldered. His jaw was carved from granite. For a long moment, the two men simply stood in the cooling light, one who commanded hundreds, and one who commanded himself. Then, without a word, the colonel raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. The gesture cut through the silence like a bell. It wasn't casual or ceremonial, it was reverent, and though the guard did not move a muscle, the salute hung there as an acknowledgement that the guard had upheld something far older and stronger than either of them. Nearby, a small boy who had been clutching his mother's hand through the entire ordeal tugged on her sleeve. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried. "A hero, isn't he?" His mother blinked away tears and nodded. The boy stared at the guard as though looking at a statue of a knight from a storybook, something ancient and untouchable. Around them, others began to leave the plaza, but they moved slowly, speaking in murmurs, casting one last look back at the solitary figure standing under the fading sky. Inside, though no one could see it, the guard's mind was far from still. Beneath the mask of precision and stone, memories rippled like shadows on water. He thought of the friend he'd lost, the one who had always joked about becoming a tomb guard someday. He thought of the day he'd found his friend's dog tag in the mud and kept it, carrying it with him through every drill, every freezing night, every agonizing step on the mat. And tonight, when the plaza was empty and the relief guard came to take his post, he would slip that dog tag out from his breast pocket and hold it for just a moment, the cool metal pressing into his palm. He would not cry, he never did, but he would close his eyes, breathe, and silently tell his friend, "I did right by you today." The guard knew tomorrow would bring another shift, another set of steps on the mat, another rotation of perfect stillness. The world would move around him, chaos and noise, but he would remain. That was his duty, not to react, not to retaliate, but to endure. The tomb of the unknown soldier would be watched. The honor would not falter on his watch. Not today, not ever. And though the plaza would be silent again, and the tourists tomorrow would never know what had happened here tonight, the people who witnessed it would remember. They would tell the story of the day a woman tried to break the unbreakable, and found herself staring at something stronger than anger, stronger than pride. They would remember the man who did not flinch, who did not bend, who stood. And so, as the final shadows stretched across the marble, the plaza fell into complete stillness once again. The chaos, the shouting, the clash of ego against duty, all of it had faded like a storm rolling out to sea. What remained was the same quiet that had been there for generations. And one lone guard, standing watch. Vivian's name would drift through the headlines for a few days, clickbait titles, heated debates, endless comment sections. Some would call her reckless, others would call her brave. But those who had been there, who had stood frozen as they watched that guard refuse to move, knew the truth. Her outburst had never stood a chance against centuries of honor, because what she had tried to shatter wasn't a man, it was an idea, and ideas, especially ones forged from sacrifice and guarded by silence, do not break. The tomb guard didn't win by overpowering her. He didn't raise his voice, didn't throw her to the ground, didn't even look angry. He won because he stood, and sometimes, stillness is the loudest roar there is. As the world scrolled and speculated, the guard returned to his steps, his rifle gleaming in the dying light, each measured stride echoing across the stone like a heartbeat. He would never tell his story. He wasn't allowed to. That wasn't the point. The point was that the unknown would never be left alone. Tradition is not weakness. Stillness is strength. And if this moment moved you, if it made you see that discipline and honor still matter in a world obsessed with noise, then don't let it fade here. Share this story. Subscribe for more true stories of quiet courage, and help keep the legacy alive. Because men like him will never ask for thanks, but they deserve it.